Think reading while driving just means glancing at your phone? Wait until you meet the Florida salesman who decided that studying his sales manual at 80 miles per hour was peak multitasking. When your steering wheel becomes a bookstand, physics writes the final chapter. This guy discovered that some literature is literally death-defying. Welcome back to Wow Amazing, where we celebrate humanity's most spectacular failures to use common sense. Before we count down today's collection of mind-blowing decision-making, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. So buckle up because we're about to explore stories that prove natural selection is working around the clock. Number 10. The self-stabbing frame-up. Let's begin our countdown with a story that proves revenge is a dish best served never. In March 2005, Christopher, a 19-year-old whose brilliant mind was matched only by his terrible execution. After a night of heavy drinking, Christopher noticed his liquor supply was mysteriously low. Most people would blame their own consumption, but Christopher had a different theory about the missing booze. He was absolutely convinced his neighbor had stolen a bottle, and this criminal injustice demanded immediate action. Christopher confronted his neighbor with a knife, but the intimidation tactics failed to produce a confession or the missing alcohol. So he retreated to his apartment to brood about the perfect revenge plan. But Christopher's alcohol-soaked brain had a much more creative solution to this neighborhood dispute. He would stab himself and blame the neighbor for attempted murder. Surely the perfect frame-up job. Christopher calmly called 911 and informed the dispatcher that his neighbor had just stabbed him. Witnesses saw him enter the bathroom looking perfectly fine, then emerge still looking healthy and uninjured. But a moment later, blood began gushing from his chest as he suddenly started screaming for help. Deputies arrived quickly, but Christopher had already bled to death from his self-inflicted wounds. The autopsy revealed his masterful execution of the world's worst revenge plot. He had stabbed himself in the chest twice. Apparently, the first wound didn't look convincing enough for his frame-up scheme. Christopher died in vain, as witnesses confirmed his neighbor wasn't even in the building. All he got for his revenge was an accidental death sentence and a Darwin Award. Number 9. The forgotten air supply. But if you think self-inflicted wounds are bad, wait until you hear about this group of divers who forgot the most basic rule of staying alive underwater. In June 2022, Tioman, Malaysia, became the setting for a diving disaster that could have been prevented with a simple pre-dive checklist. A group of 4 leisure divers, including their dive master, jumped into the waters for what should have been a routine recreational dive. They had enough experience to know better, which makes what happened next even more incredible. Every single diver in the group had committed the same fundamental error. They forgot to turn on their air tanks. This is like forgetting to put gas in your car before a road trip. Except underwater, you can't just coast to the nearest station. The group began their descent, letting air out of their buoyancy devices to sink toward the ocean floor. That's when they discovered their collective stupidity in the most terrifying way possible. When they tried to breathe from their regulators, nothing happened. No airflow, no life-sustaining oxygen, just the horrifying realization that they were sinking fast. 3 of the divers, including the victim's boyfriend, managed to panic their way back to the surface through desperate flailing and sheer terror. But one diver couldn't make it, sinking into the murky depths while her companions watched helplessly from above. The boyfriend and 2 others had to witness their friend drown right before their eyes, knowing they could have prevented it with a simple equipment check. Marine police later retrieved her body, and the irony was almost too cruel to believe. Her air tank was completely full. She had died of suffocation while carrying a tank full of breathable air on her back. All 4 divers had been guilty of absolute neglect, but only one paid the ultimate price for their collective stupidity. Number 8. The Sales Manual Scholar. Now let's cruise over to Florida, where multitasking took on a whole new, deadly meaning. In March 1993, a 24-year-old salesman from Hialeah, whose dedication to his job was about to become legendary for all the wrong reasons. Our Darwin Award winner was driving down Interstate 95 in the middle of a busy afternoon, traveling at a blistering 80 miles per hour. Most people would consider high-speed highway driving a task requiring full attention, but this ambitious salesman had different priorities. He had apparently decided that his commute was the perfect time to catch up on his professional reading. Police found him after his car smashed into a pole in the median strip with devastating force. The crash scene told the story of his final moments with fine clarity. Clutched against his chest was his sales manual, still open to whatever page had captured his attention more than the road ahead. This wasn't a quick glance at directions or a momentary distraction. He had been actively reading while controlling a vehicle at highway speeds. The sales manual was pressed so tightly against his body that investigators knew he had been studying it intensely right up until impact. Whatever his motivation, he had turned his car into a mobile classroom with deadly consequences. At 80 miles per hour, even a few seconds of looking away from the road can cover hundreds of feet of dangerous territory. The irony was perfect. A salesman whose job required understanding people and situations had completely misunderstood the basic requirements of staying alive. His final sales pitch was written in twisted metal and emergency room reports. But if you think reading while driving shows poor judgment, wait until you meet this Mexican man who decided the drunk beehive robbery was a brilliant idea. Number 7. The Honey Hunter. In September 2003, a 60-year-old from Escobedo, whose thirst for honey was only matched by his complete misunderstanding of bee psychology. Our Darwin Award winner had already consumed what most people would consider too much alcohol for one evening. But instead of calling it a night and sleeping off his intoxication, he decided his drinking session needed a sweet dessert course. He spotted a nearby beehive and his alcohol-clouded brain immediately saw opportunity where sober people would see danger. His plan was beautifully simple. Walk up to the active beehive and help himself to some fresh honey. After all, there was plenty to go around, and surely the bees would be happy to share their hard work with a friendly neighborhood drunk. What could possibly go wrong when approaching thousands of armed insects while heavily intoxicated? He stumbled toward the hive with the confidence that only comes from serious alcohol consumption. The bees, however, had a very different perspective on this uninvited honey sampling. Over 1,000 noble defenders immediately launched into action, following a Darwinian signal bred into them for millennia. Each bee gave their life to protect the hive, sacrificing their stingers in a coordinated defensive assault. The man's body responded to this mass attack with terminal anaphylactic shock, proving that bees are much better at chemical warfare than drunk humans. A hospital spokesman later disputed the theory that bees had actually killed him, attributing his death to the stupid things drunken people do. He pointed out that the victim was otherwise healthy and would have enjoyed a long life if he had just avoided the bees. Number 6. The Grenade Gambler. Now let's travel to Cambodia, where intimidation tactics met basic physics with predictable results. In September 2003, there was Kim, known as the Big Giant, a man whose huge size was only matched by his impressive lack of common sense. Kim was an intimidatingly large former military policeman who had decided that extortion was his new career path. He showed up at a Phnom Penh drug dealer's home with a simple business proposition: hand over money and amphetamines or face the consequences. His negotiation tool of choice was a live hand grenade, which he thought would provide excellent motivation for cooperation. The plan started perfectly. He pulled the pin from the grenade to demonstrate his serious intentions. The drug dealer, being a reasonable businessman, immediately decided that cooperation was preferable to explosive death. He quickly gathered the requested items, probably hoping this terrifying customer would leave as soon as possible. After completing his successful extortion, he forgot one crucial detail about grenade operation. Once you pull the pin and release the lever, you have a very limited time before the device explodes, regardless of where it happens to be. Kim absent-mindedly slipped the armed grenade into his pocket, apparently thinking his business transaction was complete. He walked confidently to his motorbike, probably feeling quite satisfied with his intimidation skills. As he climbed aboard his motorcycle, ready to ride off into the sunset with his ill-gotten gains, the grenade decided to fulfill its primary function. The explosion was immediate and thorough, transforming the Big Giant into significantly smaller pieces. Whether the drug dealer recovered his cash and drugs, but he certainly got an unforgettable lesson in explosive karma. A military expert later pointed out that returning the pin to a triggered grenade won't stop the detonation process. Kim's military police background should have included basic instruction about grenade operation, but apparently he had skipped that particular class. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one you think you understand, but actually don't. Number 5. the speeding snowmobiler. Now let's talk about our next story, which takes place in New York in February 2003. It's about a 25-year-old fireman named Brian the Brain, who clearly knew more about fighting fires than dealing with snow, and whose nickname turned out to be sadly ironic. He had a hobby that made life miserable for his neighbors. He loved racing his snowmobile at high speeds through residential streets while people were trying to sleep. This wasn't just inconsiderate, it was illegal, dangerous, and showed a stunning lack of judgment for someone whose job involved preventing disasters. On this particular winter night, Brian decided to take his reckless hobby to the next level. He was operating an unregistered, uninsured snowmobile without a helmet while heavily intoxicated. This combination of violations would have been impressive on its own, but Brian was just getting started with his poor decision-making. He was racing through a dark residential area at dangerous speeds, treating quiet neighborhood streets like his personal raceway. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. Brian worked for the same fire company that responded to snowmobile accidents. His own department regularly preached snowmobile safety and dealt with the gruesome results of exactly the kind of reckless behavior he was demonstrating. Even more ironic, his fire station had posted an illuminated helmet safety notice just 700 feet from his own home. Every day, Brian walked past a sign reminding him to wear protective gear, then went out and ignored that advice completely. His reckless joyride came to an abrupt end when he drove headfirst into a tree at full speed. The same firefighting company that employed Brian was dispatched to peel him off the tree trunk. His colleagues had to respond to a fatal accident involving their own co-worker, who had died doing exactly what they warned people not to do. Brian's death became a teaching moment for the very safety principles he had spent his life preaching to others. Number 4, the Derby car mechanic. If you think ironic work-related deaths are bad, wait until you hear about this Minnesota man who mistook a demolition derby car for a safe mechanical lift. In September 2003, Scott, a 16-year member of the Machinists Union, apparently never learned the dangers of trying to repair a car with makeshift methods. Scott owned a demolition derby car, which meant he understood that these vehicles were designed to be crashed, repaired, and crashed again. Derby cars are intentionally built to be fragile and expendable. They're meant to crumple and break during competition. This makes them significantly less stable than normal cars, especially when it comes to supporting weight. Scott needed to get underneath his derby car for some repairs, which required lifting the vehicle off the ground. Most mechanics would use proper jack stands or drive the car onto ramps designed for safely supporting vehicles. But Scott had spotted a handy Bobcat-type skid loader nearby and thought he'd found a clever shortcut. Why take the time to properly secure the car when you could just use heavy machinery to lift it by the bumper? His plan seemed logical. Use the skid loader to grab the car's bumper and lift the whole vehicle into the air. Then he could simply slide underneath and perform his repairs in comfort. What could go wrong with using construction equipment as an improvised car lift? Scott positioned the skid loader, grabbed the car's bumper, and successfully raised the vehicle off the ground. Feeling confident about his innovative repair technique, he slid underneath the suspended car. But derby car bumpers aren't designed to support the entire weight of a vehicle. They're meant to be sacrificial crash components. The moment Scott's weight shifted under the car, the stressed bumper did exactly what derby car parts are designed to do. It broke off completely, dropping the entire vehicle onto the mechanic below. Help was immediately summoned, but it was far too late to save Scott from his improvised crushing machine. He had lost his final demolition derby, but this time he was under the car instead of inside it. Number 3, the Ostrich dancers. Now let's shuffle over to a series of stories that prove ostriches are nobody's dance partners. The year 2000 brought us multiple tales of men who seriously misunderstood the social customs of large flightless birds. Our first dancer was a gentleman in Denver who couldn't find a human partner for his evening entertainment. Instead of accepting loneliness or trying a dating app, he decided that an ostrich would make an excellent substitute. He drove to an ostrich farm, climbed a 10-foot security fence, and attempted to catch one of these massive birds. If you can imagine romantic music playing in the background, that would be the perfect soundtrack for this disaster. The man and ostrich became intertwined in what he apparently thought was an intimate slow dance. But when the pace picked up, the ostrich decided this dance lesson wasn't worth the trouble. The bird began flapping and pecking, clearly indicating that the relationship wasn't working out. Our romantic hero decided to run away, which was exactly the wrong response to an agitated ostrich. Ostriches have a herd mentality. When one runs, they all run, and suddenly he was being chased by multiple angry birds. He tried playing dead, forgetting that ostriches have incredibly strong legs and tend to kick first and ask questions later. Multiple pairs of powerful ostrich legs began stomping him into the ground. The farm owner finally noticed the commotion and called 911 to report the first ever ostrich hoedown. Our dancer survived but remained hospitalized with pretty much everything broken. Meanwhile, in Arkansas, 90-year-old David and his wife decided they wanted their own ostrich. They climbed into an ostrich pen and came face to neck with a territorial male bird. After politely asking the ostrich to escort them off the premises, they realized this was a complicated bird who preferred solitude. The ostrich attacked the elderly couple, killing David and critically injuring his wife. The moral of these stories is simple. Ostriches work for Darwin, and they're very good at their job. Number 2, the groin shooter. Our next story proves that mixing anger issues with poor weapon handling never ends well. In Canada, on July 4, 2000, a simple billiards room argument quickly escalated, ending in what can only be described as accidental self-surgery. The 34-year-old Darwin Award winner had been caught up in a heated argument in a Calgary pool hall. Most people would sleep off their anger or maybe write a strongly worded letter, but our hero had different conflict resolution strategies. He decided the best way to settle the score was to return with a small caliber handgun tucked into his waistband. This plan showed impressive commitment to escalation and a stunning lack of understanding about firearm safety. When he arrived back at the billiards room, ready to demonstrate his seriousness, he reached for his weapon. But as he pulled the gun from his waistband, it discharged immediately. The bullet found its target with perfect accuracy, striking him directly in the groin. The inspector noted that while the injuries weren't life-threatening, I would suggest they were life-altering. This was a polite way of saying that our Darwin Award winner had significantly reduced his chances of contributing to the gene pool. He had effectively performed involuntary sterilization surgery on himself while trying to intimidate someone else. The irony was perfect. A man so angry about losing an argument that he accidentally ensured he would never win the genetic lottery. His gun had fired exactly once and hit exactly the right target to earn him a Darwin Award nomination. This wasn't just an accident. It was cosmic justice delivered through ballistics and poor planning. Number 1, the rap video suicide. Now let's talk about our number 1 Darwin Award winner whose story combines artistic expression with terminal stupidity. In February 2000, Robert, a 24-year-old gangster rap video maker, gave a final performance that turned out to be far more real than anyone imagined. Robert was creating a 10-minute music video at his apartment with his brother Michael and a friend named Fred. The video was meant to showcase his artistic vision and establish his credibility in the competitive world of gangster rap. But Robert apparently believed that authentic gangster rap required actual life-threatening behavior rather than just tough guy posturing. While the cameras rolled, capturing what he thought would be his breakthrough performance, Robert reached for a .22 caliber handgun. This wasn't a prop gun or a fake weapon. It was a real firearm loaded with real bullets. Most artists use special effects, makeup, or camera tricks to create dramatic scenes. But Robert was committed to absolute realism. He swung the muzzle of the gun directly to his temple, while the cameras captured every moment. Then, in front of his brother and friend, he pulled the trigger and fired the gun into his own head. This wasn't an accident, a misfire, or a tragic mistake. It was an intentional suicide performed for artistic purposes. Police were summoned to the scene by neighbors complaining about loud music and violent shouting. When they arrived, Michael had to be physically restrained from interfering with the crime scene investigation. Fred struck a paramedic who was trying to help, showing that poor judgment ran in Robert's social circle. Both men faced misdemeanor charges for interfering with emergency responders. Robert died in a coma at Ohio State University Medical Center, having created the ultimate one-take performance. His final video was more authentic than any gangster rap production in history, but it was also his last. He had created the most genuine gangster rap video ever filmed, but nobody would ever see it because it was evidence in a death investigation. Bonus entry: the Hardheads. Our bonus round features 2 men who proved that having a hard head isn't always an advantage, especially when facing objects that are significantly harder. These stories show that sometimes the nickname Hardhead is more prediction than description. In September 2000, a 32-year-old hitchhiker in South Carolina who had found what he thought was the perfect way to travel. Instead of standing by the roadside with his thumb out like a normal person, he decided to catch a ride on a pallet truck. This wasn't just any ride. He was perched on top of the vehicle as it cruised down the highway at 55 miles per hour. The driver had specifically warned his passengers not to sit up there, telling them they were being hard-headed about safety. But our Darwin Award winner was committed to his elevated travel experience, probably enjoying the wind in his hair and the view from above. His scenic journey came to an abrupt end when the truck passed under a concrete bridge overpass. The bridge was designed for normal vehicle clearance, not for people who decided to add extra height to their transportation. The concrete overpass struck him in the head with the full force of physics and forward momentum. The impact proved that while he might have been hard-headed in personality, he definitely wasn't hard-headed enough for bridge architecture. Meanwhile, in January 2001, Australia gave us a 37-year-old man who had found an even more creative way to enjoy vehicular transportation. He was lying on the roof of a Land Cruiser, stargazing with his buddy while his wife drove them home. This mobile astronomy session involved watching the stars overhead while feeling the vehicle rocking gently beneath him. The plan was working perfectly until an unexpected jolt launched Dean from the roof into the night sky. His wife probably had some strong opinions about passengers who treated her SUV like a mobile observation deck. Dean went from stargazing to becoming one with the cosmos in the most direct way possible. Both men had earned the hardhead title through their stubborn refusal to follow basic safety advice. Unfortunately, when hardheads meet harder objects, the objects always win. And there you have it, folks. 11 absolutely incredible examples of why common sense should be a required course in every educational system. If you enjoyed today's countdown of spectacular decision-making disasters, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And remember, if you know someone who could benefit from these cautionary tales, share this video with them immediately. You might just save a life by showing them what happens when creativity meets stupidity. This is wow amazing, reminding you that natural selection never takes a coffee break, and sometimes the best revenge is just staying alive.